Hey, Teresa.
Um, Hello, welcome everyone to the Roosevelt Alumni for Racial Equity Rare open discussion with a very special guest, Elmer Dixon. And he's going to be describing his journey and also talking about his best-selling memoir, from Seattle Black Panther revolutionary to global diversity expert. So that's the topic. Elmer is a Seattle icon along with his family, has had a rich and diverse life working for equity and justice and human rights. And we are delighted and thrilled to have him with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Is it Alan?
Yeah, I was supposed to go first, wasn't I? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let me introduce Teresa. Teresa Stovall was born in Seattle, Washington, when much of the country was racially segregated and her parents' marriage was illegal in 16 states, and grew up in Seattle's pre-gentrified central area. She attended Seward Elementary School, Temple, the Hirsch Sinai Hebrew School, Meany Middle School, and then bused to Jane Addams Middle School and Roosevelt High School. An alumnus of Black Arts West and Oscar Productions Film School, she attended the University of Washington and graduated from the Evergreen State College with a BA in Multimedia Communications. An author from the age of 7, Teresa has written several books, poems, and plays on various topics, including racial identity and the impact of colorism on people of color. Her books include The Squirrel Girl, Coming of Race in the United States. Teresa Stovall.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we will have, let me introduce our speaker,
Here we
right?
go.
You know,
Yeah.
Let me
I'm
introduce Elmer Dixon. So I'm really excited. Elmer is one of my longtime role models and mentors. And so I'm really excited. Many of you might know parts of his story and know him, but I'm really delighted to introduce you to Elmer. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Elmer is a Black Panther leader, a Seattle icon, and a global diversity expert. From co-founding the first chapter of the Black Panther Party outside of California in his teens to bringing decades of expertise in leading a successful diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging firm, Elmer's life and work have been defined by a revolutionary spirit grounded in integrity and tirelessly working towards a more just and humane world. As co-founder of the Seattle chapter of the Panther Party at age 17, Elmer wore a beret, a leather jacket, and a holster with a loaded gun. Elmer's image, holding a rifle as he stands front and center on the steps of the Washington State Capitol building, flanked by his comrades bearing arms to protest unjust gun control laws, is one of the most iconic photographs of the entire Black Power era. That image reflects Elmer's passionate commitment to standing for justice and the Panther Party's mission to provide armed patrols protecting Black people from police beatings and killings throughout their time in Seattle. In 1968, Elmer was an ordinary teenager who made an extraordinary choice to commit his life to the growing Black liberation movement that was sweeping the northern United States. He was inspired by movement leaders and horrified by police murders of his peers. So Elmer and his older brother Aaron co-founded the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party in the central area. For 16 years, Elmer and his comrades resisted unrelenting government and police attacks to provide essential community services. These survival programs included a free breakfast for children program, freedom school, free food program, free legal aid, a thriving free medical clinic, family visits to inmates, tutoring for inmates, pioneering sickle cell anemia testing, and police alert patrols to prevent police abuses. Growing up in a multicultural community with diverse friends taught Elmer real world inclusion, and the Panther Party's pioneering Rainbow Coalition showed him the strength of strategic partnerships with people of various races and ethnicities to work for a common cause. When the Seattle chapter shifted its identity, Elmer was recruited to serve as branch director for the Al Davies Boys and Girls Club, where he redirected millions of dollars planned for a club for white youth back into Tacoma's predominantly Black Hilltop community. Still working for the people, Elmer became the training manager and EEO officer for the Seattle Parks Department, where he designed and implemented anti-sexual harassment policies and staff training, and he spearheaded the recruitment of women into non-traditional trades such as plumbers, electricians, and truck drivers. While he was investigating cases of sexual harassment, Elmer called for the firing of a formerly insulated, high-profile male senior manager who kept harassing women. While his recommendation was controversial, it was upheld, and it prompted then Mayor Charles Royer to appoint Elmer to his cabinet as director of the Citizens Service Bureau. When word of the controversial firing reached the two women founders of Executive Diversity Services, they recruited Elmer to become a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging trainer. He quickly rose from their top consultant and staff trainer to vice president, and in 2010, Elmer became the president of Executive Diversity Services. He has parlayed his revolutionary roots to lead EDS's diverse teams in providing impactful training for more than 600,000 people at 200 companies, including Microsoft, Goodwill, the MacArthur Foundation, PepsiCo, United Airlines, JCPenney, U.S. Gypsum, the state of Washington, the city of Berkeley, California, and Houston Methodist, one of the largest hospital organizations in the country. Elmer is also president of the Society for Intercultural Education, Training, and Research USA, and often presents nationally and internationally. He has a very successful 2023 TEDx talk at the University of Tulsa titled Stories from the Revolution's Front Lines. And he is a popular guest lecturer throughout Europe and teaches at JAMK University of Applied Sciences in Finland and at SPMA University, an undergraduate program of EdHec Business School in France. Elmer's new best-selling memoir, Die Standing, From Black Panther Revolutionary to Global Diversity Consultant, not only recounts his extraordinary journey from fighting for freedom, justice, and human rights while warding off assassination attempts to commanding executive boardrooms, but it sets the historical record straight about the Black Panther Party's programs and legacies and provides lessons for today's social justice activists about working for collective change. So I am very delighted to give you Elmer Dixon, Global Diversity Consultant, President of Executive Diversity Services, and author of Die Standing, From Black Panther Revolutionary to Global Diversity Consultant, whose life motto is, I live to make a difference in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Gee, that was a lot of stuff, Teresa. I sometimes wonder, is that she talking about me? When I think about members of the Black Panther Party and my book and my story, I wrote it with the intent of giving people a view of who members of the Black Panther Party were and are, because we came to being in a generation that was at a crucial turning point. I was born in Chicago in 1950 in the same neighborhood that Emmett Till was from. And Emmett was, as you all probably know, was brutally murdered in Mississippi when I was 5 years old. And while I didn't know about it at that age, my father had written a poem because he too grew up in that same neighborhood, as did my mother. My mother's family was from Mississippi. She spent time as a child in Mississippi. And the community in Chicago and Black communities around the country were in an uproar. And my father wrote a poem that was published in a one of the local Black Chicago newspapers, and it really launched the civil rights movement. By the time um, we became members of the Black Panther Party, the civil rights movement had reached an apex. Um, Young people, people my age, were had grown up witnessing uh, the the events of the civil rights movement, the attack on the Pettus Bridge, Bloody Sunday, the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, and these things that we were exposed to. Our parents made sure that we saw these things on TV, that we were aware of them. They didn't try to hide them from us because they knew the importance of us being aware of our history and being aware of what was going on in the country. But the scenes that we saw, and I often tell my audiences that I grew up in an era of assassinations. First with of course, with Emmett, and then the assassination of Kennedy. Kennedy was an important figure in Black communities across the country because he was seen as someone who was sympathetic to the civil rights legislation that Dr. King was putting together, and so he was seen as sympathetic, and he was seen as a ray of light for our cause. And he was assassinated, of course, before he could finish his first term. And I remember at 13 watching his funeral on TV unfold and actually seeing the live footage of Oswald being shot as he was being escorted through the police station. Then the murders of Medgar Evers, the 16th Street Baptist Church happened that same year. The three civil rights workers, Cheney and the others, who were found along the side of the road. The assassination of Malcolm X in '65, the insurrections in Watts in Detroit, and it was pretty evident that while the efforts of Dr. King were striving to make change peacefully, it was pretty evident that a very brutal society, a country that has a very long and brutal history, was not going to make that transition, allow that transition to happen peacefully. And for those in my generation, a choice was coming. And Teresa mentioned that I grew up as an ordinary, uh, teenager, youth, in extraordinary times. And I would say that, yes, I was an ordinary teenager, who got into the same kind of mischief and good times that, kids our age would do. I grew up in a melting pot neighborhood, which may have been different from a lot of other people's reality. That's really where the foundation of really respecting people from other backgrounds came from. My parents had a very diverse collection of friends. I had my first matzo ball when I was 12 years old, and these things, shaped who I would become. And so by the time I was 17, a guy by the name of Stokely Carmichael came to Seattle. And again, the mood in the country was beginning to shift. Stokely was the first person who had called for Black power in public. I don't want to say he coined that phrase, but he was the first one who shouted it out in public at a big rally. He said, "What we need is Black power," and it really launched the Black Power movement. And so when he came to Seattle, he had taken over from a brother by the name of H. Rap Brown, who was also a very fiery orator and speaker. He was known for a T-shirt. Actually, it was an image of him on a T-shirt of him holding up a match, and the caption read "Burn, baby, burn." And this was in response to what was going on and had happened in Detroit and also in Watts. And so when Stokely came to town, and I remember everybody from my community, from the CD and kids on the South End, Black students had gathered at Garfield High School. And the thing that I remember him saying is the reason why Black people don't have freedom is because you don't love yourself. In fact, he said, you hate the color of your skin. And he gave the analogies. The good cowboy wears white, the bad cowboy wears black, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember thinking, how true is that? And I remember on the playground, when I was growing up there in Madrona, across the street from our parents' home, that if someone dared call me black, those were fighting words, like I ain't black. And so he was right. We had been, brainwashed into thinking that anything black was bad. And so that's the a woke moment that they call today. They call it a woke. We called it back then being politically conscious. And of course, the right wing will tell you that a wokeism is a bad thing. But when you look up a woke in the dictionary, it says being aware of yourself, self identity, and also being aware of the conditions around you. So I don't know how that could be bad. And so it was my political consciousness moment, and I joined SNCC. And that fall, me and my buddies, when I say buddies, there was one of our group was a young sister by the name of Kathy Jones. Kathy was also from a multicultural family like you, Teresa, and she was a fiery young sister. And so we started the first high school Black student union on the west coast of the United States at Garfield. And that led to a series of, in fact, in order to get it started, we had to disrupt things at the school. I got kicked out of school several times in succession. You mentioned me playing in a band, Alan, and the first time we disrupted things, I sat down and because I was in the stage band as well as the marching band, and so we at the pep we played for the pep assemblies, and I sat down and refused to play the Star Spangled Banner, and the band director, Mr. Pucci, said, if you're going to be in the band, you've got to play. And of course I got kicked out of school and brought back to school, and so the next week I sat down and played the Star Spangled Banner, and got run out of school again. And eventually, we when we took over we called the all school boycott, and none of the black kids, white kids, the Latino kids, the Asian kids went to class either because we all grew up together, and so it was this multicultural force that shut down Garfield. And so there was a series of events. We were called out to Franklin High School because the kids out there were being kicked out of school, the black kids, for fighting with white kids. And sister was told that she had to go home because she had an afro. And so we ended up taking over the principal's office. And the principal relented. And the next day, when he called the school, he begged us to leave. Well, a few days later, I was in my geometry class and the phone rang and they said they want you in the office again. Well, when I stepped out of the classroom, there were two detectives there that took me to juvie. And unbeknownst to me, my brother Aaron, Larry Gossett, Carl Miller, E.J. Brisker, they were rounded up at the UW because they had started a BSU out there. And when I got into juvie, they were taken to jail, of course. When I got into juvie, there was a big commotion around the TV. And when I went over to see what all the commotion was about, MLK had just been assassinated. So it was almost like they knew to get us off the street. And my parents picked me up that night, very solemn. We had marched with King when he came here when I was 11 in '61. But when they picked me up, I can only imagine what they were. Not only were they distraught over King being assassinated, but their two oldest sons were in jail or juvie that same night. What they must have thought was on the horizon. A week later, we were in California at San Francisco State University, where we met, unbeknownst, we didn't know Chairman Bobby Seale was going to be at this event, but he was there and he was the keynote speaker. He gave a fiery speech, and it just lit a fire, lit a flame in some of us there. And in fact, it probably scared the death out of most of those students. There are 300 or 400 students that had come from across the country to attend the West Coast Conference of Black Student Unions. And he talked about fighting until our blood runs in the streets. And the reason why he was so mad is 2 days after MLK was assassinated, little Bobby Hutton was shot, brutally murdered in the streets of Oakland while in police custody. So we made a beeline to Chairman Bobby, Aaron and I, and a few others, and told him we wanted to start a chapter of the Black Panther Party. People don't realize that at that point in 1968, the party had one chapter outside of central headquarters, and that was the Southern California chapter in Los Angeles, headed by Bunchy Carter and John Huggins. And so when we approached Chairman Bobby, we became the second chapter overall and the first chapter outside of the state of California. Bobby was at our house a week later. My parents remember walking in the door and seeing all of these bodies all over and stepping over them and going back to the kitchen and politely closing the door while Bobby laid down the rules of the Black Panther Party. And he told us we needed two things, that we needed to read twice a day and attend PE classes twice a week, one of which I invited Teresa as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old into attend the community PE class. That's political education. And the second thing he said we needed were 2 weapons and 1,000 rounds of ammunition, because he said they're coming for you. Anytime you stand up against one of the biggest bullies in history, they're going to come after you. And certainly enough, that summer of 1968, J. Edgar Hoover named the Black Panther Party the #1 threat to the internal security of the United States. And that's when they unleashed an all-out attack across the Black Panther Party to destroy, disrupt, eliminate, and discredit and prevent the rise of a Black Messiah. And so we became targets. My brother and I were targets of assassination. But, at that point and at that age, we had no fear. Weapons became a common part of life because we were the hunted, but we turned the tables on the cops and made them the hunted. We started our very first survival program, which was the Police Alert Patrol, where we patrolled the police in our community with shotguns and law books because we knew what our legal rights were. We knew how far we could stand from a police car or from a police officer while they were carrying out their duty, and we let them know that we were not going to allow them to brutalize and murder someone in our community, and they didn't like that. The other programs that we started, and I have to tell people that we were not a social service agency. You hear about all of the programs that Teresa mentioned. The second program that we started was the Children's Free Breakfast Program, where we fed in Seattle thousands of kids a hot breakfast every morning before they went to school across the city in 5 locations. We had breakfast programs spread all across the country. And these programs were intended to, one, feed kids that were not getting fed, didn't matter what color they were, and to uplift them so that when they went to school, they could go in and learn, with the knowledge that they were special, and to not let teachers inadvertently put them down or discourage them from learning. And so I had a very strong purpose. That program embarrassed the federal government into starting free breakfast programs eventually within the next 10 years. Our free medical clinics that we started around the country, I think there were as many as 19 of them. There was a free dental clinic in Portland, Oregon. And the Seattle chapter Black Panther Party free medical clinic is the only existing or only free medical, original Black Panther free medical clinics still in existence here in Seattle today as the Carolyn Downs Family Medical Center. We brought the national spotlight on a disease that affected primarily Black people, sickle cell anemia. It was because of the Black Panther Party that the National Sickle Cell Anemia Foundation was founded, which now they have announced a second round of cures that they found through stem cell here in the last 6 months. These things were because of what the Black Panther Party did. Our free busing to prisons programs, our free tutoring programs, these were all survival programs pending revolution. And so I speak around the country and globe about the Black Panther Party and what we stood for, and our mission, what we our 10-point platform and program to inspire young people to be freedom fighters. And I speak at universities in Ireland, and every year I'm in Finland. I'm speaking at a university in France this year. But as I speak to these schools and these students, the group, I got to tell y'all that the age group that inspires me the most are the kindergarten through fifth graders. The elementary schools here in the Seattle area have me speak every year. I'm in 4 or 5 or 6 different schools, and you just wouldn't believe the excitement these kids have in having a, I guess they think I'm a piece of history, come in and speak to them. And when I speak to them, I don't do it as if I'm speaking to adults like I speak at universities or any other program. I have the teachers educate them first on the Black Panther Party, who we were, what our 10-point program was, what our survival programs were, and then I answer their questions. So they're loaded with questions when I come in. I'll never forget the first question that I got from a little white kid in Bellevue, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle, at Spirit Ridge Elementary. And he had so much excitement in his little body when he asked the question. He said, "What was it like being on the police alert patrol?" It just kind of blew me away that this kid knew that the importance of us, protecting the community, defending the community, and the righteousness of it. And so these kids, their minds are open. It's only when adults taint their little brains with fear or hatred, and it's so important that they hear the truth. When I'm talking to these kids, whether it be kindergarten or whether it be sixth graders or whether it be high schoolers, I always implore them to read a book, Lies My Teachers Told Me. And I tell them this in front of their teachers so that to challenge, education, challenge their thinking, challenge the information that they're being fed so that they can hear the truth, so that they can understand how it's important for them to capture the moment. Teresa mentioned that one of the mottos that she said that I live by. There's another motto that I borrowed from the Shawshank Redemption that is one that I live by, and that is get busy living or get busy dying. And when you think about what your life is about, and what you want to accomplish and do in life, it's so much more than the crap that they're feeding young people today. To the the urgency to become rich or to become famous, or these things that on the social media promotes all of this stuff. But life is so much more than that. I think we all realize that, but our young people are being fed this, and they're being fed this for a very specific reason, and that is to throw them off of the truth so that they don't see what's happening around them. That's why the right wing will have you believe that being awoke is a negative thing, so that you walk around in a stupor, and that you're, as Malcolm said, hoodwinked, bamboozled, misled, but not seeing what's right in front of you. So I love speaking to young people because young people are, in fact, as we know, our future. They're the future of this world. And if they don't stand up and make a difference, it's not going to happen. So my life's work today is really geared towards informing, uplifting, raising up, lifting up, inspiring young people to be freedom fighters. And I tell this to kindergartners through fifth graders, and I have them shouting back to me as I say, I am a revolutionary. And they say it back, I am a revolutionary. And, instilling that in those little young hearts and minds so that they won't fall for this crap that we've fallen for as a society. And that's my mission in life, is to make sure that young people understand the truth, that they
That is
see
beautiful, Elmer.
what we stood for and what we
Yes.
need to accomplish. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, I have a question, but also, and I was remiss in not doing this before, so forgive me. Audience, participants, what we're going to do is we're going to have open up for Q&A when Elmer's done with his central presentation, and you can put questions in the chat and also use the raised hand emoji under responses. And then you'll go to the top of the screen and we'll see you, and Robin will call you for questions. I just wanted to mention that. But I have a question for you, Elmer. Thank you for
Okay.
sharing all of that. And so, your transition, of course, is extraordinary and captivating. And I wanted to ask something about that. Like, what were the key beliefs that you carried with you from your youth through your work with the Panther Party into your current work as a diversity leader? What core beliefs and values have carried you through, and have they shifted? Have they evolved at all?
Well, I think first and foremost, as a core belief, and it's something that King espoused and that our parents emphasized, and that is to judge a person by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. I think that's first and foremost, is being able to recognize and see humanity. My brother Aaron often says that the the difference in a revolutionary, the thing about being a revolutionary, is that we abhor, we hate oppression, whether it's no matter what color, what gender, sexual orientation, we abhor violence and oppression of people. And that comes out of a love for humanity. The thing that people are misled about, I think most of all about the Black Panther Party, is that we were inspired by hate or anger. And in fact, we were inspired by a love for our community. And it's that love for community, that's the core value. That's the core, the basic core principle, is a love of the people and hating oppression. Um, those are the things that continue to drive me and have always driven me forward.
Beautiful. Thank you. And so what is diversity like now? What is the industry like now under so much so many attacks?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, because the industry is in a bit of turmoil. Shortly after, I'm 74 years old, and I've kind of considered myself the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years kind of in semi-retirement. From the years of these very large contracts where we trained 65,000 managers for PepsiCo and PepsiCo International on 10 different countries on 5 different continents. United Airlines, we trained 19,000 flight attendants. These are very large contracts. My relationship with U.S. Gypsum in Chicago was a 12-year relationship, and so as my business partners retired and one of them's now deceased, and I was the last person standing in the office. Now I still have 10 consultants that are part of my team that I use in various trainings. But I, was content to have, a couple of medium-sized clients and, kind of utilize my team and kind of slow down a little bit. But then, of course, George Floyd happened, and Breonna Taylor, and Arbery, and that kicked the business back up into high gear. And so everybody wanted some form of D&I training, DEI training, and the requests flooded back in. And this was just, what, 4 years ago. And but the after those after a couple of years, 2.5, 3 years, the fervor started to die down. And then now we've always seen peaks and valleys in our business, but the thing about the current attacks, of course, we know they're political, and we know that they're promoted by people that are ignorant because they don't understand what diversity is. And these companies that we're going to scale back our DEI programs. They don't have value, but people, if they really think about it. See, one of the reasoning around their thought process is that they've always tried to position diversity in the same light as affirmative action, and we know the bad uh, taste that people got in their mouths around affirmative action and how it was sidewinded. It was misaligned, and so they try to connect diversity, equity, and inclusion to affirmative action, as if that means then you're bringing in unqualified people to do a job. This is what they tried to do with the sister that was at Harvard University. This is what they tried to, the Trump heads try to do with Kamala, saying she was a diversity hire. And so they're misaligning DEI with affirmative action. Affirmative action has already been misaligned. And so that's caused people to kind of pause and step back. But see, you can only tell a lie so far. I just got a note from my technician who works on my website. He said that in the last 30 days, we set a record for inquiries. People inquiring because they want to do a second look and really understand what's going on here. Diversity has nothing to do with affirmative action. Diversity is, or very little, if any. Diversity is simply differences that we all have. Whether it be what we call primary characteristics, things that we think that we can see, like race or ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, or nationality, and a whole lot of secondary characteristics like political ideology, religion, social or economic status, educational background. So all of these different parts of who we are. And the research was clear when it was first done. The first business case for DEI was done. It was D&I back then. The first business case was done around 2000. And all of the studies that you put together then and now are very clear that diverse employees, when you have a diverse team in an organization, they will consistently outperform homogeneous teams over and over and over and over again, consistently. And so the data is there. Even my one of my writers who writes for our website, she's just did an article just last week, and the studies that she was quoting were 2018 and 2019 that said the same thing that was said 20 years ago. That diverse employees bring more resources, more ways of thinking, more problem solving. All of that stuff is real. And so while they can lie about it now, and it'll have an effect for a short time, but people will realize that it's another attempt to lie. And so, yes, things have slowed down, but I'm telling you, the surge is going to come back up again because you can't dispute facts, and that's just the heart of it. You can't dispute the fact.
Love
Thank
it.
you.
Love it. We
Mary?
have some questions.
Yeah, Mary Hotchkiss has a question, and we'll follow that right up with Joe Hunter's question.
Thank you. Thank you, Elmer, for sharing. I am not a Roosevelt grad. I'm from Washington, D.C., but I live in the neighborhood. And I worked with Leah Vaughn at UW for a long time. I have a question that's maybe answered on your website, but I worked with Edwin Lindo years ago, and I was wondering what's going on with the newspaper project, the Black Panther papers.
Yeah, here locally, there is a guy that has been collecting Panther archives. It may be the gentleman that you
It
mentioned.
is. It's Edwin.
And
Yeah.
and we're in touch with him. We'd like to have some of his material in the interpretive center,
Mhm.
and or even a place for him to store it. I just got a message on Messenger last week from a guy that he said that I don't know if he actually met me back then when I was working for the park department. He was a temporary employee. He used to come into the office where I was working and empty our garbage cans. And he said he knew who I was, but he didn't, I guess he didn't say anything. He just, he did his work, and he saw me online and reached out to me, and he said that he's got a whole basement full of Panther newspapers that he wants to give me. And so we're just getting started on procurement efforts to try to get to Black families and other families, white, whatever color they are, get the families that have Panther memorabilia. In fact, one of the other items that he said that he has is an original Eldridge Cleaver for President poster.
Yeah.
And, and in fact, I spoke to another family that has an original wanted poster for Eldridge Cleaver when he fled the country after Little Bobby's assassination. So it's items like that that we'll be collecting. But there's a guy in Sacramento, former Panther, that was in the party from way back in '68, and he he is the procurer of the official Black Panther website called BPP. It's About Time BPP, and Billy X, he's a very good friend, and there's a documentary that's being made about the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party. Major documentary. In fact, it just got the last of its funding from SIF at the event that we were at last Friday night. They gave us gave our producer another $150,000 to finish up the last of the money that he needs to finish the film. But when part that we filmed in Oakland, we filmed in Sacramento because he has an archive in his house that you would not believe. Now he has almost every edition of the paper, if not all of the editions of the paper, going back to the very first mimeograph one that was printed. But he has memorabilia, so much of it, that we want to make sure that we do a standing visit from him where we archive, where we transition some of his stuff in and out of our interpretive center once we get it established. So there's a lot of work I know being done to preserve these artifacts, preserve the newspaper, and so we're just making sure that we're in the middle of that so that we can have some of those things in our interpretive center.
Thank you. The past is important. The future is even more important, but documenting is
Documenting
key.
is
So thank
critical.
you.
Yes.
Joe, go ahead.
Joe?
Joe, you're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, I'm going to refer to you as Mr. Dixon.
Okay.
Out of a sign of respect.
Thank you.
Much respect for your journey and all the contributions that you've made in the past and probably going forward as well. I was born in CD. Okay. Garfield, a lot of things that you mentioned, Stoli Carmichael, coming to Garfield. I remember as a young kid being out there, not in the school listening to it, but on the outside, and just the overall feeling and pride and whatever that came out, that people, the emotions that came out from that, what have you. And the Black Panther Party, I went to Washington Junior High. And I remember there's some things going on at Washington Junior High, and the Black Panthers showed up. And when you showed up and got attention and so forth. There were a lot of things at that time as a young man growing up I wasn't aware of. I really was. Later on in life, I got to really understand what was really going on, what was happening, and so forth. But the question, let me first of all, again, I said my name was Joe Hunter. I'm the chair of RARE, this organization, and then along one of the co-founders, along with Tony Allison, who is also on here. And I want to thank you for giving us your time and participating in this open discussion. The question I have, Mr. Dixon, is if Mr. Dixon, at age 74,
Yeah.
okay, were to go back in history and talk to Elmer at age 16, 17, what would that conversation sound like? What would you say to the younger version of yourself?
That's a pretty deep question. And as I ponder that response, the thing that is, and I've been asked similar questions before, and the thing is, I never want to second guess the things that we were about or that we were doing, because one, we were learning what it meant to be revolutionaries in the moment. And these things that we were learning, experiencing, the mistakes, the successes, were all part of my development process, and all of our development process. You can't shortcut learning. The things that we go through in life, we're meant to go through them because they teach us to become the people that we are today. And if I could say one thing, it would, it would be to continually stay alert, be aware of your surroundings. You think about today with all of the electronics that we have, all of the computers and cell phones. We didn't even have cell phones in 1968, let alone an internet or a computer. When brothers and sisters came into the office, and I need to say that 60% of the members of the Black Panther Party were women. When brothers and sisters came into the office, and we had a form that they had an application that they had to fill out, but we had no real means of doing background checks. And so we were infiltrated, and the party, that was the tool that the FBI used, and that the oppressor has used throughout history, is to divide and conquer. And so, when someone filled out an application, we had to do the quick questioning in the community that we knew how to do, and that is, do you know this person? Can you vouch for this person? But there wasn't a real background check, and that's how informants and agent provocateurs got into our midst. And so I think the thing that I would say to myself is to continue to be true to who you are, and trust your gut, and stay alert, because that's what we had to do. People, often it's young people that ask me, were you ever scared? And I don't ever remember being afraid. We we went about our business every day without fear. We stepped out of the office every morning at 5:30 or 6 o'clock a.m. coming off of guard duty because we had 24-hour guard shifts on our office because we were under constant threat of attack. We never knew if, you know, if we were going to get shot at that day, or if someone had set us up, or what might unfold. But we never worried about that. We didn't have time to worry about that. I had a couple of bodyguards. One of them turned out to be an agent, but we went out without fear. And so it's those things. I think understanding that we were fearless, we were principled, and that I think those are the things that allowed us to be able to respond in the moment, and still come out alive, but also survive the onslaught of attacks that were being perpetrated against members of the Black Panther Party. People don't realize to the extent that they were actually trying to wipe us off the face of the earth. Um, but we weren't worried about that because we had each other. Uh, it's hard to describe the camaraderie that existed in the Black Panther Party. Our comrades were like our family. They were our family, and so we relied heavily upon each other. And so I guess I would say it's just be true to yourself. Remember to always stay true to who you are, which is what I tried to do.
Thank
Elmer, I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question. Going back to, the Rainbow Coalition that the Black Panther
Yes.
Party pioneered, who are some of the other groups that you all partnered and collaborated with in the Seattle area at that time?
Well, we worked with a lot of different organizations. The Native American groups here in the Pacific Northwest, um, uh, Bernie White Bear, and the Puyallup Indians, the El Centro de la Raza, um, um, the Latino organization led by Chata Maestas and Roberto Maestas. Um, um, there were a number of them. The Peace and Freedom Party. Um, we had the only uh, Japanese member of the Black Panther Party. Mike Tagawa was an original Seattle Black Panther, and so we had a strong connection to the Asian community. In fact, when we were reorganizing our free medical clinic, we formed a group of medical clinics that were the community health care centers, and the other clinics that we formed a coalition with were the Aradia Women's Clinic. And I want to point out that one of our strongest allies and part of our Rainbow Coalition was a group of white women known as the Radical Women, Gloria Martin, and those are some fierce ladies, boy, Claire Frazier. But Aradia Women's Clinic, Country Doctor Community Health Center, CMAR Clinic, the Native American or the Latino Clinic, and the ID Clinic in the International District. So those were 5 clinics that formed the consortium of clinics here in Seattle that allowed us to reorganize our free medical clinic. So progressive whites, Asians, Latinos, other Black organizations, we formed coalitions with them. One of our strongest support groups, and almost a kind of a quasi-military group, were the Black contractors, led by Milton Norwood. and they were almost like a backup armed squad that we had when we needed extra weapon power. So it was. I'm probably missing a few, but those are some of the ones that come to mind right away.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think Robin has a question.
Thank you. How were your parents affected by the work you were doing? Because when you started, you weren't even legally an adult. Were they attacked, affected? And did you have family meetings saying what's going on now? And
No family meetings. I will tell you initially that when I got kicked out of Garfield, I was still 17, a senior that fall. My dad brought me back up to the school the first time. When I got kicked out the second time, my mother brought me up to the school, and she remembered that the vice principal told her, asked her, she said, "Mrs. Dixon, can't you make him stop?" And her response was, "I can't make him do anything." Um, we were raised to be independent thinkers, doers, and when I was arrested, that was my second arrest in juvie. The first was when I was coming back from a high school basketball game after playing in the jazz band, probably in December or of '67, and the somewhere in that around that time. And when I came down, those of you that are from Seattle know that across from Franklin High School used to be Dag's Restaurant. And there was a big, huge parking lot. And all the kids would come down there, didn't matter what high school you were from, and hang out and, just have a big hangout out there in Dag's parking lot. And when I came down the hill off of Beacon, it was like a battle zone. There was tear gas everywhere. Kids were running and screaming. The cops were everywhere. And I had parked my car and I'd come over and I saw this cop had this young sister with her face down on the ground. And I came over to her and I asked her, I said, "Are you all right? You need some help?" And then the next thing I knew, I was being slammed to the ground and arrested, and and I got sent to juvie, and I was charged with inciting a riot. The riot had already taken place, and so the second time I went to juvie, when King was assassinated, it was like they knew that something was on the horizon, and they knew it was this wave that could not be stopped. There was nothing they could have said to me or Aaron because we were already on this trajectory. And so they were very supportive. When Chairman Bobby came to Seattle, and when we were starting the chapter, as I said, when my parents came in from work, they saw all these bodies laying all over their living room and dining room. They just stepped over the bodies and went into the kitchen and closed the door. As Bobby was laying down the rules of the party. But my mother often told stories that the phone would ring at night, and the phone was on her side of the bed, so she would answer it, and the person on the other end would say, "We're going to kill that nigger son of yours, Elmer. Or we're going to kill that nigger son of yours, Aaron." And she would simply say to them, "Go ahead and try," um, because one, she knew that we were armed, and number two, that she knew we could take care of ourselves. She knew I had bodyguards, and so she knew that we were in the thick of this movement, and we were not going to be deterred. And so her and my father would cook for community dinners that we had. We would have these big community dinners, and my dad dug a fire pit in his backyard so he could cook barbecue for the community dinner. They were always supportive. They were they were behind us. I think I mentioned that my dad was born in Kentucky, and his mother, my grandmother, who lived to be 102, was born in Kentucky in the town that bore the family's name. And it was called Brookstown. And her mother, Amanda Brooks, who was the matriarch of the family, her her father, which was my grandmother's grandfather, and her uncle had fought in the Civil War. And when they came back from fighting in the Civil War, they were one of the small number of black people that got the 40 acres and a mule. And they took their 40 acres and a mule and they built Brookstown, which had its own school, livery stable, church. And so they come out of this rich history. My mother, with her parents, came out of Mississippi. Her mother passed for white in the 1930s and 40s. Right after the Great Depression. She was a very light complected woman, and my grandfather, her father, was dark skinned. They were opposites in terms of skin color, but that was a common practice, a common thing in Mississippi, because of the slave master always went tipping, into the slave quarters, and so there was a lot of mulattoes, as they called them. So they understood the South. They understood Jim Crow. They understood the dangers that black people had gone throughout history, and so they didn't raise us to be fearful. They didn't raise us to not confront evil when we saw it, and so they just there was just an unspoken support for Aaron and I.
Awesome. Okay, Bruce.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Okay. I just had a couple points to mention here. You said that J. Edgar Hoover said that the Black Panthers were the biggest domestic threat at the time, and if you'd ask the FBI what is the biggest domestic threat today, the FBI would say right-wing violence. And all you have to do is look at Oklahoma City on January 6th. See, that's true. Another point you made is that the attack on DEI is political, and it sure is. And it was launched by this Seattle guy named Christopher Rufo.
Yeah.
And he said, we have successfully frozen their brand, quote, critical race theory into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions. We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all the various cultural insanities under that brand category. Now, nobody had ever heard of critical race theory. Nobody had. And suddenly, it's up there with Charles Manson, but anyway, those are just a couple points.
Yeah.
But like Joe said, I admire you, Mr. Dixon. You're really inspiring to keep on doing work for the greater good. And even in prison, you showed this love of learning and did great masonry work. That you were proud of and took pride in. So that's really something. So I do have a question, two questions. One, did you think that in the 21st century, and we're quarter way through the 21st century, that the politics have become so overtly racial, appealing to white fears, and as it is now?
Yeah, history also always has a way of repeating itself. And we knew that the task that we set out to achieve, that the goals that we set out to achieve were unfinished. And we knew that the job was undone because the FBI and the CIA worked hard to undo us. And we knew that there was still a long road ahead. And so I'm not surprised by it because we know that history will repeat itself. But I'm also aware that in the end, good will win out over evil because evil always exposes itself. And so we were just a catalyst. It's important to be able to pass the torch off to young revolutionaries that come behind us. And so we used to say revolution in our lifetime, but I'm not dead yet, but we knew that the change would come down the road. And so just because we closed our doors officially as a Black Panther Party does not mean that we were going to stop, trying to grow the minds of the people, grow the minds of young people in particular, which is what we're doing now, which is what my life is about, is growing the minds of these young people so that they can step in to, where we left off and continue to build a revolution. I'll tell you, when I'm in a revolutionary movement, when I'm in Finland, I've been guest lecturing at Yamp University of Applied Sciences for the last 13 years on diversity related topics, multicultural topics. But before I could ever get the word diversity out of my mouth, the students there wanted to learn about the Black Panther Party first. And so the department head started taking me out into the community, into white high schools. And this first high school that I went into, auditorium was packed with the kids, probably 400 or 500 of them. And when he introduced me, he told the audience, he said that he read this book called Soul on Ice. Now, this is a principal of a high school in Finland who had read Soul on Ice. I was like freaking blown away. And so the afterwards, when I've been in several high schools over there, the white Finnish kids come up and ask me, how do we start a Black Panther Party here in Finland? I mean, so, when you think about, globally, what I see out there are young people that they get the deal. They know what's going on. They're not, they're not blinded. I was speaking at um, Birmingham City College in Birmingham, UK, a couple of years ago, and about 6 or 7 young Black women, um, 18, 19 years old, they came down and surrounded me and said, "We're starting a revolution now." I don't know what they're doing, but I know that they are inspired. And so and I emphasize to these young people that the way we fought in '68 is not the way that you're going to fight today. You know, um, while we patrolled police with shotguns and law books, it's young people who patrol the police with their cell phone cameras. That's what got that cop caught who was murdering George Floyd in the street. He thought he could just murder him with people looking on. And that young sister, that young woman, was brave enough to keep filming him while he was murdering this man in the street. And so cell phone is one of their new weapons. But educating themselves and continuing to stand up for what is right. So, yes, I could see that it was coming. I wouldn't have predicted that it would have been this, but who could have predicted that we would have the next potential Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump, because he sounds just like the fool. And so that's history trying to repeat itself. So, you got to be aware that happens. That one of the books that we used to read was Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. And he talked about everything being in a state of flux. And as things, progress and change, there's going to be a cycle of oppression that's going to come back around. And it's always been that way. And so it's being prepared for the next cycle and continuing to grow young people so that they can eventually maybe put an end to this thing. I may not see it in my lifetime, but if I see young people rise up in my lifetime, that'll be good enough for me.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other emojis, so I'm going to ask 2 more questions. I'm a dog. A lot of people here went to the U. And were you involved? Remember what was going on in the 1969 boycott of Husky football by the Black players, Harvey Blanks, Donnie Moore?
Yeah.
Donnie Moore was kicked off the team the year before. But I just, did you know any of those guys?
Yeah. One of the guys that was on that team was Willie Austin. He played under King Don, what was his name? Don James, and at that same time. And Willie is the person that inspired me to become a bodybuilder and get my body in shape. So I knew several of those cats and was very aware of what they were doing out there with and eventually that statue of Don James got taken down.
No, it was Jim Owens.
Oh, not Don James, but
Don
Jim Owens.
James.
That's what it was. Jim Owens. That's who it was.
Don James was a different guy, you know. Matter of
Don
fact,
James was a different guy. It was Jim Owens. That's the name I was trying to think of. Yeah.
he uh, he recruited Warren Moon, who
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
not drafted in the NFL
Yeah.
because, you
Oh,
know,
I followed Warren's whole career when he went to Edmonton and won 5 straight Grey Cups because they were trying to make him into a wide receiver. That's right. Don recruited Moon. Yeah, but it was the other guy. The
Okay.
other guy that you mentioned.
Since I'm not seeing any more emojis, I'm going to ask you one more question. And
All
I
right.
was an English teacher. So how long did it take you to write this book, and what was your routine in writing?
It's probably over a combined 10 years. And I began, I consulted with my protege, Teresa Stovall, and she told me to get an outline. So I did an outline of my life, and and the outline really, it in the outline it really described different eras. So it was minute because it wasn't just big pieces. I broke it down into minute sections. And then I started, because I speak at the University of Washington every year, I started gathering, I was able to recruit interns. And so I had interns that were gathering info. They were doing research, finding photos, doing interviews for me of former Panthers and people in the community so we could gather information so that I could kind of feed my memory bank. And eventually I was ready to start putting it on paper. And I'm not a writer per se, an author. I'm not a writer. I write good business stuff, but I'm not an author writer. So I recorded it. I put it on Google. First, I used Dragon software. Dragon software is flawed. So we switched over to Google Speak. All computers have a Google Speak. And I just started talking it out using my outline, and my interns were there with me, and they would prompt me with questions. So say more about this person, or say more about that. Well, why did you do this? Why didn't you do this instead? And that just so I told the story. I told it. I literally spoke it out, and they were doing some rough editing while I was doing that. And when it was all ready, I gave it to my editors at Two Sisters Writing and Publishing. They did a great job of editing my story and published it. That's how it happened.
Thank you. And you are a writer. Joe Hunter has another question.
Yes, thank you. Part of this question really pretty much comes from a personal experience, I guess. You had mentioned a number of corporations where you've done diversity training. Okay, one of those companies you mentioned was JCPenney's, which I spent a lot of years working with, and a lot of my career and working with them was in HR, doing HR work. Originally, affirmative action coordinator, and then moving up to regional HR manager. But anyway, and I remember just being in these diversity workshops, and we'd have week-long workshops where they'd have senior management come in. Okay. And we'd have workshops in LA. I was in LA at the time, and we'd bring in all the district managers and so forth. And the thing about it is, it seemed like a lot of times, this is personal experience, just personal opinion, it was a checker box. It was a checker box. It was something happened. As a result of something happened, we needed to be able to say that we have something going on and become a checker box. And so my question is around, okay, we definitely need diversity training and so forth. People I don't know why they have to be taught how to respect other people for who they are, but what has been your experience in terms of in working with these corporations or working with a group of individuals where you feel that you've had the biggest impact on the diversity, the culture, and accepting diversity?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. I think that I had to turn my light on out there. While we're in the middle of this, it started to get dark outside.
Yeah.
One, let me talk about J.C. Penney, because by the time we got to J.C. Penney, it was in the mid 2000s. They had gone through a lot of the programs that you were talking about, which were really check the box programs. And the CEO at the time, his name was Michael something. He was the old guy. And when he got a look at our training program, the fact that, we don't do kumbaya. We don't do let's all hold hands together and sing around the campfire. We do skills-based training where we teach people the complexities of creating inclusion and equity, and it requires personal work. And we had launched that program at J.C. Penney, and about halfway through, he retired, and it started to wane, and the company started to suffer. I don't know how long you were at J.C. Penney, but they started to lose business, not because they weren't doing the training, but because they just weren't, on the cutting edge of how business was developing. And that kind of short circuited our work there. We didn't really get to do the full magnitude of the work. The best work that we do is when we have a client who is committed to a very specific goal or an outcome, and they commit to organizational change. One of those companies was US Gypsum. When I started with USG, they were a Fortune 100 company. They had 12,000 employees, 52 plants across the United States. This was in 1997, going into 1998. They had 30, a team, executive team of 30 people. It was called the OMC. And of those 30 people, in as late as 1997, 98, how many do you think were women? That's a question.
I'd say very few based on what I know. Very few.
The answer is zero. How many how many do you think were people of color? Same answer, zero. So we set about a process to first transform that group, and then the next level down, the next 200 leaders. And it began by helping them build a business case. We took them away on a 2-day retreat, helped them build a business case, why it was important for USG, and best practices. And we guided them through that process. And at the end of those 2 days, the CEO, president and CEO, who had just lost his wife to cancer. He was the youngest CEO ever to be appointed to that position for that company. And he got up and he gave an impassioned speech and said that he had 2 daughters that he was raising on his own. And he said he did not want to be the head of a company where his daughters had no chance of getting a position up in upper leadership. And so we got a verbal commitment from those 30, and we began this process. And as I mentioned, this was a long-term process. They were a client for 12 years. About 5 years into the process, and I remember telling the COO, who was a very good friend, who's deceased now, when he asked me, Elmer, is it always about training? And I said, no, it's not always about training. There's a whole lot of other organizational issues that you need to address. But I said that if you expect your managers and your leaders to change behavior, then you have to give them training. They have to learn, what are the fundamentals of exclusion that lead to, as you dismantle those things, that lead into inclusion. So about 5 years into the process, they had shrunk the size of the OMC from 30 down to about 18. At that point, a full third of who were women or people of color. They had already started making the shift. They built a second round of business case and best practices on their own. We had already did a strategic plan. We had already done 2 rounds of cultural competency training, 2 rounds of assessment where we did an organizational wide assessment. And then we measured against that in the second round, and they were driving the ship. And I was able to pull back after I said about 12 years. And in 2017, they got recognition from an organization called Chicago United that oversees companies in the Chicagoland area. And they got the highest recognition for having the best D&I strategy in all of Chicagoland. And this was 20 years after the date when we started working with them. It was a long-term process, and they had to do the work. So the best work is when you get a long-term commitment. It's not a fly-by-night. It's not a check the box. It's not a kumbaya, but it's work. It takes work in order to change behavior, change perspective, change style approach, because we look at different communication styles and behavior styles, and how those really lead to labeling and marginalizing people by trying to make everybody be the same. And the worst mistake that organizations make is that they when they claim that they're looking for diversity, when they hire people in a new DEI program, they still hire people just like themselves, whether they are different color or not, or even a different gender. They still replicate themselves because they can't see beyond their own styles and their own behaviors, their own values. And so that's our work, is to help them see beyond that. We did that same thing with PepsiCo and PepsiCo International. Their goal was to land on the list of the 50 best countries to work for. And at the time we started working with them, they were not even on the list. The president was Steve Reineman. We had done private meetings with Steve, and he understood that he was going to have to replace himself. He replaced himself, and she was in my first class out at in PepsiCo headquarters in what they called the White House up in Rye, New York, outside of Rye, New York, and Brent, what was the name of that little city where PepsiCo headquarters is? Anyway, her name was Indra Anui. And if those of you that know of Indra, she became the first woman of color to lead a Fortune 100 company. And she led the company for the next 10, 15 years. And during that time, after our first round of training with their managers, their directors and managers, they landed at number 19 on the list. The second round of training, they landed as high as number 6 because they made the commitment and the employees felt it. So it's a long-term commitment. It's not a check the box. The companies that are doing check the box are not going to move the dial. There has to be a long-term commitment. And that's where we've had the most success.
Okay.
Thank you so much for this really engaging, invigorating session. Teresa is going to put up a little screen that gives a little information about your book for people who are interested. And then I hope you all take a moment to stay on for just a moment, because we have like a 3-question survey to do afterwards. So there you go.
Yeah. Oh, am I still muted? Hold on.
No, you're good.
Oh, good. Hi, can y'all hear me? Okay, so yes, check out Elmer's amazing new memoir, Die Standing. And you can get it on Amazon, but it's even better if you get it from twosisterswriting.com, twosisterswriting.com, right?
Yes.
Yes, twosisterswriting.com, which is directly from the small women and women of color owned publishing company that Elmer worked with. They did such a great job on his memoir. And I just want to thank you. And everybody for coming. But Elmer, thank you so much for gracing us with your insights and your wisdom, and of course, your amazing story. And again, I am not unbiased, but I totally recommend Elmer's book. By the way, if you look at the cover, they did a great job. That is taken from the iconic Black Power era photo that makes the rounds on social media at least 2 or 3 times a year, globally. And that's Elmer in the front, right? So that, and then on the state steps of the state capitol, Washington State Capitol in Olympia, right?
Yep.
Showing, yes. So that again, but yeah, the memoir is a great read. I think Bruce is actually your best hype man for the book. But yeah, it's an engaging read, whether you're from Seattle or not, whether you know Seattle or not. It's informative, it's inspiring, and it really captures not just the flavor of the times, but that, you know, when all of these things took place, the 60s and the 70s, etc., but shows, just as Elmer did tonight, the relevance of all of those same issues, all of those same concepts today, how they're still relevant and everything else today. And so please hold on for our 3-question survey. But I also want to, I'm still learning how to get this to move, y'all. Okay. I'm trying to get this to move to the last slide. Forgive me. It won't move. Anyway, so sorry, Robin. I don't know how to make this move.
That's okay. I'm going to see if I can get this pulled.
I think there's a button down there that says unmute. Stop screen share.
Well, I can stop the share, but I have another slide I made for you, sir.
Oh, I see. You're trying to
There
move
you go.
Oh, there you go.
I don't
All
know
right.
what I hit. Okay, so we wanted to thank you all. Order Elmer's memoir from Two Sisters Writing on Amazon, and follow Elmer on Facebook as Elmer Dixon and on Instagram as official Elmer Dixon. There you go. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the discussion.
I'm going to see if I can bring up this poll.
I need to stop sharing now.
Okay. Oh, well, maybe I can.
The poll.
Hey,
There it is.
so I guess I'm done. I'm signing off.
You are.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Live a full life.
Love to the family.
You never know how much we have left.
Ashe.
For those of you that knew the Dinish family that were in Seattle,
Yeah.
Dinish is David.
No.
He went by the name of Mapinzi. David Dinish. He just passed last night. Had a heart attack. So prayers and condolences to the Dinish family.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
So I think I can bring up this.
Okay, we got you.
Can you see this?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. Let's see what we got. I don't know why it's not going. Oh, well, guess what? Apparently I have to send it to you. So I'll tell you what. I do, because you registered, I have your emails. So I will go ahead and email the survey to you if you don't mind. That would be one way to do it. So again, thank you all for hanging in it. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Buy the book.
So much. Glad I came. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much. Take good care.
Peace.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.